Welcome to Freshwaves. I'm your host, Bren Masson. We're bringing you some very interesting conversation today, so stay tuned. We are talking with Susan Wadds. And Susan is an accomplished author and writer and facilitator, and we're really happy to have her on for what we're going to call part 2, but in fact, it actually may be a whole new thing. So Susan, last time we talked to you, you were shortlisted with a publisher, and you were waiting to hear if they were going to accept your novel. How did it go?
Well, it went great. I was one of 9 out of 25 that were selected to have their novels published. So, yay!
Well, yay, that's amazing. Yeah. Now, when you were shortlisted, does that mean that, I heard you refer several times on your social media page to the fact that they were going to read your novel. What happens in the publishing world? When people say they're actually going to read it, do they go past the step of reading one piece to reading the whole book, or how does it work?
So do you mean in their selection process?
Yes.
Yeah, so how it works is that you submit, normally, each publisher and each agent is a little bit different, but what you do is you submit a query with a synopsis of your book, and then depending on who you're submitting to, sometimes they'll ask for the first chapter or the first 25 or 50 pages, and then based on that, if they feel that that's juicy for them, then they will request a full manuscript. So yes, that's when they read it, and that's what Regal House did. They, a little unusual, they wanted a print copy, like real paper.
Wow.
It was very strange going to the post office with this book with this, 300 and some odd pages in a big box. So they read it, and I imagine more than one person read it.
Wow. And then you got the good news.
Yes, I got the good news. It was interesting because they said they sent me an email saying the last step in our acquisition process is to have a chat with you. So I was in the middle of a writing retreat, and I was like, oh my God, I thought I was going to find out on that Friday, but no, in fact, they wanted to talk to me, so it was set up for the week after. And, I didn't know. And that Regal House Publishing, what they were particularly, because they're they're not one of the big 5 publishers in the U.S., they wanted to ensure that the books that they were acquiring, that the authors were going to do a lot of their own publicity and marketing. And that was a lot of what that conversation was about. It was a Zoom talk with both of the editors, wonderful women, and so I kind of had to. What I said to them was, what you have to know about me is that I'm an extrovert, and I'm not afraid to throw myself around. My therapist had called me counterphobic, which means that when I'm afraid, I just jump right in. And they quite like that. So I don't know if that was the selling point or what.
I imagine it had something to do with it because, in this world of self-publishing now and self-promotion, I don't think there's any stronger form of advertising, quite honestly.
Yeah. It still feels very... every time I put myself out there, it really feels like I don't have any pants on. It feels very vulnerable, but, it's what we have to do. So, look at me, buy my book.
Well, there's a lot of authors who are real introverts, aren't there?
Yeah, I think classically more are introverts than extroverts. So it's very challenging to put yourself out like that.
So you actually did the big reveal over Facebook Live, which I think is very brave of you. So you were sitting there and you decided to do Facebook Live. What made you think of allowing all of us, I think is how I would put it, welcoming all of us into this really personal moment of yours?
Well, for the aforementioned reason that you got to put yourself out, I think, I thought, well, it's a hard business, and even if the answer was no, people need to see that you can get that far and still not make it. So, which has happened with this particular book several times, almost. But I just felt that I was, I had been talking about my book, and I don't know, it just seemed like a really good idea. Either way, there were going to be tears, right?
Oh, absolutely.
and also my son tells me that the biggest, he's the big TikToker, and people love the fails, but apparently they like the triumphs too, because I got more feedback from that little video of me weeping openly. Once I read the email and found that they were in fact going to take my book, than I have for any of my other posts on any of my other platforms. So.
Yeah, I was. I can say that there were tears on this end, and in my kitchen where I happened to be watching it at the time, my kids are like, "What's going on?" And I said, "A friend of mine just got published." And they said, "Oh, like somebody won the lottery or something." I said they did.
And that's what it felt like.
That's what it must have felt like. Now, how long did it take you to get this book published?
Oh, please. Yeah. So I finished it in 2015.
Wow.
And it will be published in 2024.
That's quite the process.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it going to be like watching your baby be on the shelves of bookstores and things?
Well, who knows? It's, from my friends and people that I know that have had books published, it's pretty stunning, to walk into a bookstore and actually see your book there on the shelf. It's going to be pretty amazing. But like I said, it won't be out till 2024. So we have a little wait to do.
Yeah, the hurry up and wait. That you must be kind of, it's almost like being pregnant for 2 years.
Yeah. Well, I've been pregnant since 2015.
Okay, so how does this change your writing and what you're doing? Are you actually moving on to the next book? Do you have a contract that you have to write another book? Or
No, I don't have another contract, and no, but I was already. I mean, when I finished the book, So since then, I've actually finished one other book and a kind of a YA novel, and I've got the first draft of the next one done. It's 84,000 words. So yeah, plus you just keep writing. You don't stop. And that's not the end of the road. It's just how does it change? And yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really give me. It's funny. I'll just back up a little, because I used to say all I want is to have one traditionally published book, and I will be happy. And I am happy, but it doesn't end there, is the point.
Yeah. It's like, that's what I said. It's a new beginning. It's a new chapter. And it's exciting.
Yeah. So I will be assigned an editor in October of this year. And then I guess we have close to a year to perfect it.
It's funny that you say that, because it seems to me that when you finish the book, you've probably already gone through an editing process.
Yeah.
Or 2, maybe 3. And then you have your beta readers and they give you an idea and you do another editing process. So by this time, in your own mind, it must be fairly as perfect as you can see it being.
Well, yes and no. It definitely was, but it's funny because the characters in the story is still very alive in me, as if it were actually happened. So, but I think, but I could have, and I might have, and maybe because I'm thinking about right now. I'm thinking about like a professional editor that's going to publish this book, looking at it, and I'm starting to see where there might be some little kind of mushy points or something that could be a little crisper, and things that I didn't mention that I might have, because I know this person, the narrator, the main character intimately, and I know more about her than is on the page. So maybe some of those things. So yeah, I wouldn't say. Oh, and just as an anecdote, Zoe Whittall, I remember seeing her. She wrote, was it The Best Kind of People, I think. I saw her at an author's book festival, and she said that she read, and I saw her twice, and she read the same passage from the book. And I asked her, I asked her, why did you read the same passage? And she said, because I hate my book. She said, this is the only passage I can tolerate.
Wow.
And I've heard other authors say that they absolutely do not want to look at their published books.
Now, do you think that maybe that's because they were forced by an editor or publishing house to change things that they didn't want to change? Or is it that they just grow tired of the book?
I think it's probably more the latter would be my guess. And also because as every book you write, every story you write, you've learned things and you've gotten stronger and maybe, a little bit more skilled at your craft. And so, I'm sure you know, because you also write, if you look at some of your older stuff, you might find it cringeworthy, as I do when I look at my old stuff.
Yeah.
So, there's that.
Mm-hmm. That's why I've really marveled at some of the musicians that you see, like Bruce Springsteen, who's still singing the same songs that he's been singing for 30 years. And you think, how do you bring life to something that is just so old?
Yeah, I often wonder about that with songs. Yes, one song. It's not a whole book. But
even the book.
Different parts in a book you can.
I don't know about you, but I save the books that I really, really like. So I'll go back to a book that I have saved because I loved it so much when I read it. And I'll start rereading it thinking, it's not really ringing true right now. But it sure did when I read it.
If you wrote it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Except I think if I wrote it, it would kind of be like one of my kids. I can look at their baby pictures and appreciate where I was then.
Yeah, well, that would be thinner for me.
Okay, so what's next then when you look at, okay, now you've accomplished that dream of, I just want to be published. Now what? Do you want to be published again? Or is that enough for now?
No, the intention is to get published. The second book is out on submission, and and definitely this one. I think I just recently my profile got accepted to be I can now apply for Canada Council grants. I was I'm qualified already to apply for Ontario Arts Council grants, but Canada Council is a bit more exacting. And because of this, I assume because of the book and a couple of more publications, they accepted me, so I can apply for grants, bigger grants. Not saying that I'll get them, but that's the intention, is get some grant money so that I can book off my time and really focus. Because the novel that I have now, it's I've got 84,000 words. It's complete, but it's not complete, and it needs a total overhaul. And I can't do that in 2-hour increments or 4-hour increments here and there. I need a steady timeline to really hold it all at the same time and fix it. So that's next for me, is to try and get some time off to focus on that project. Mm-hmm. And then, yes, hopefully to get it published. And I also think that this particular book is a little more edgy it's got a better hook, I think, than my other stories.
Now, what kind of, just so that anyone who's listening and has not heard us speak before, what kind of literature do you write?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, the genres and the designations of types of writing are movable. They seem to be quite fluid. You could say I write women's fiction, but then that has a kind of, I don't know, it sort of blocks you off. It's fiction. And then I hate to say literary fiction because that sounds highbrow. It's it's really hard to pinpoint what exactly it is. My protagonists are all women, but they're universal stories. They are not, they're not a genre, that's for sure. They don't fit into any, they're not thriller, romance, or anything like that. I know this is a very long answer.
You know what? But it's a good answer because I think in this world that we live in now, there are formulas for things. The romance has apparently so many chapters. There always has to be a conflict.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely no template. And I've been listening to some podcasts about structure, and it's really fun because they're basically saying, there is not just one sort of structure, like the 3-act structure or the 7-act or the 7-point or whatever. You can do, as James Dewar once said, you can do whatever you want as long as it works. And I love that. It's so simple. So, I write maybe like Alyssa York or I would say Sally Rooney, not really Sally Rooney, but it's sort of like, where do you put Sally Rooney? Where do you put Alyssa York? Where do you put, it's sort of literary fiction, but it's accessible literary fiction.
You're not saying that you're so wordy, is what I'm going to use, that the average person can't read your story and enjoy it.
Exactly.
Because there are some works that are beautifully written, eloquently crafted, each word, each sentence, and they're often not the easiest books to read. They're not the book that you would take to the beach.
Yeah, sometimes you find that the Giller winners are like that. They're beautifully written, but yeah, they're definitely not an easy read.
Mm-hmm. And not that all books should be an easy read, but I think it's nice to have a combination of both. I like a book that challenges me sometimes where I actually have to think, ooh, what was that word? Okay, back up. Let's go look that up and see what it actually means because I've never heard it before. I like that. But if every other word is like that, I'm not interested. It's too much work. It's not pleasurable to read. And the same thing when it's eloquently written but the story isn't grabbing me. I don't bother with it anymore. Yeah. I like a good story, I must say. And I like a story that kind of has something you can sink your teeth into that's more complicated than I got up this morning, put my 2 feet on the floor, went into the bathroom and brushed my teeth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you want to get into the character and feel something. You want to feel something for the character, yeah?
Yeah. You've already started a second novel or finished it. And would you be something where you would give this to the current publisher as they get first right of refusal, so to speak?
They don't. It's unusual, this long wait. I don't want to be 90 when my second book comes out.
Yes, exactly.
Because it was such a long process to get in, and then a long process to, it's going to be over 2 years before we see the book. So, yeah, 2.5 years or something from the time I got it accepted. So what I'm hoping is that because I have a book already published or about to be published, that, somebody that's a little quicker on the draw will pick it up.
Do you think that the other publishers will look more favorably upon your work now that you have been accepted by another publishing house?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes, absolutely. So that's what I'm looking at, and just to be perfectly frank, Regal House did not give me an advance. All the money that I will make, all the millions I'm going to make, will be from sale of the book. So,
Well, that's interesting. But that's probably very typical. I mean,
well, it's a small press. I don't think they don't have that kind of. I mean, it's not small. Actually, they say they're a small press, but when I look at the hundreds of books that they've published, I'm thinking, I mean, every day it seems they're releasing another book. So I don't know how small they actually are, quite frankly. So yeah, I don't really know where I'm going to send it, but I'm going to try for something a little more
quick.
Yeah, quick would be nice. It would be nice.
I mean, you think about it, and there's just this bizarre. I mean, somebody should write a book about writing books. But it was, you have this movie image of a person going into the publisher. They finally get accepted, and then a month later, it's rolling off the press. It's in the stores. People are buying it. You're going to book signings in bookstores and things. And by the time you finish that first book signing, your second book is already well underway. And it just seems, as many things do in the movies, to go very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's the movies.
Yep.
Now, the other thing is that I thought that by bypassing, because here's the thing, that many authors go through agents. And so I had queried every agent in Canada and lots in the U.S. and even had one for a while, you probably remember. But then it's the agent's job to sell the book to a publisher, and they're the gatekeepers to the big five.
Right.
So I remember talking to Cordelia Strube when her next book's coming out. She's wonderful, and she said you don't need an agent, because she had like 5 books published, and none of them were agented. They were all with independent publishers. So just to mention, for your listeners, that there are two for traditional publishing. There are those 2 streams. But again, when you get an agent, that's always thrilling, but then they have to sell it. And then that takes time. Mm-hmm. So, it's going to take time either way, but
it must be frustrating, the hurry up and wait, but in the same sense, you've waited all this time anyway. It's relatively short in comparison. Yeah, and you're still doing other things, so that's great. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to switch hats a little bit here, turn to the next chapter, and we're going to talk about organic writing and the AWA method, as well as some other ways of writing, and whether or not we share that kind of writing with the world. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson, and we're speaking with Susan Wadds this morning. We'll be right back, so stay tuned. Hi, this is Bren, host of Fresh Waves. I hope you're enjoying this show. Do stay tuned, because Susan is going to read to us some of her short prompt work. It's organic writing and really exciting. If you'd like to hear this podcast again, or any of the other Fresh Waves podcasts, go to our YouTube channel, Fresh Waves Radio. Hit subscribe and you can have access to all the Fresh Waves podcasts. If you'd like some information about writing workshops, or you'd like to participate in one, just drop me an email at bren@freshwaves.ca. Now let's get back to the show. Welcome back to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Bren Masson, and this morning we're speaking with Susan Wadds. Susan, I'm so happy that you were able to join us now that you're a famous author. You have a publishing contract. Congratulations, by the way. I don't think I said that in the first half, and I really do mean that. Congratulations. It's a huge, huge accomplishment.
Thank you so much.
Can I get an autographed copy of your book when it comes out?
Of course.
Thanks.
You'll have to stand in line,
Oh, no.
Like a Tim Hortons, they'll be lined out onto the street.
I'll get the complimentary one that happens before the lineup starts. I'll help you sell drinks or something. Anyway, okay, so let's turn the page here and start talking a little bit about organic writing. When you first did this, I'm sure there were more in your novel than one, what we call the shitty first draft, or the rough first draft. Anne Lamott talks about that in Bird by Bird, this awful first draft that everybody writes. So I'm sure you had more than one of those, didn't you, in writing a novel that long?
Yeah, I mean, there were, you were talking about generative writing, and because most of the scenes in the book started with prompted writing, like took me into places through the prompts that I might not have thought about. What I had, not your typical, sit down at the computer and hammer out a novel. What I had were a stack of notebooks with scenes so it was not what you think of as a draft, even though that's exactly what it was. So putting those scenes into some order would have been then the first draft, and that took some time and took several goes at it to try and sort it out.
So when we talk about organic writing, that just brings us into the AWA method. So explain a little bit. You are a facilitator in the AWA method. Explain how it works.
How it works. Well, I mean, Pat Schneider, who's the founder, said it very simply: a writer is someone who writes. So it's a very inclusive, supportive, friendly method of getting pen to paper or fingers to keyboards. And it can take many forms, many kinds of workshops, or like right now, most of them are happening over Zoom, where prompts are offered. And those prompts can be anything from a poem to a simple word, a photograph, a picture, an idea, someone standing in a doorway, for instance. And then the writings are timed, and every facilitator has a different idea of how they like to do that. Some will do a 5-minute write, or a 7-minute write, or a 12-minute. I favor the longer writes because I write with most people well, anyway, I'll get into that later. Anyway, and then again, it depends on the facilitator how it does. I particularly like to do 2 of those kind of prompts, so that then when the writers are invited to read, they can choose, which means that if they feel one piece is a bit too tender, a little too raw, maybe they don't want to expose that, then they have the option to read the safer one, let's say. Some facilitators will do a prompt and a read with volunteers to read. People, and always people are quite welcome to not read if they don't feel comfortable reading. I'll just say that usually I will encourage people to read if they say that the reason they don't want to read is because they think their work is crap, because everybody's work is crap in the beginning. That's a given. What we're looking for are the jewels and the beautiful things in the crap. If they feel that their work is too raw, too close to the bone, then of course I'm not going to press them. One does not press them. So then what happens is the other people in the group will give feedback. And that feedback is, like I say, it's looking for those gems, those jewels. We're listening for what is working in a piece, what touches us, what moves us. And it could be anything as simple as a color that stood out, that gave the work some depth. It could be a phrase, a turn of phrase. It could be the way dialogue was used. It could be the structure of the piece. It could be the way repetition was used. Anything that stood out in a way that was positive, that the listener felt was working in the piece. And what that does is it gives people, it gives them new eyes to look at their work. Because almost everybody thinks, like I say, I don't want to read this. This is, this is just, we get a lot of hand wringing. And then the surprise is that even as they're reading, they're hearing it differently than they just saw it on the page. And they're also, this is a really interesting thing that happens, because you're also, as you're listening to yourself read, you're also somehow hearing what other people are hearing. So you just kind of hear how it's landing, and then when people feed it back to you, what they found strong, often it's quite stunning for the writer to realize, and they have very fresh eyes looking. Oh, that was good. Oh, and underscoring all of that, the reason for it is that's because it keeps you writing. So many courses and schools, whatever, are criticizing, are breaking things down, finding out what's wrong, what needs to be fixed. And, to a person, I think we've been shut down at some point thinking, well, why do I bother? Why even try? Obviously, I can't do this thing. Whereas if we're told, well, that actually, that resonates, that's got some energy, that's good, then, and the other thing that happens, which is quite magical, is often you don't even realize something that you've done, like it'll be just an image that gets repeated in a different way, or a word that's used in it that you didn't intentionally put in, but when you get the feedback, you go, oh my goodness, that someone tells you that was brilliant. You think, oh, I'm brilliant. So anyway, bottom line, keeps you writing, and that's what we want to give people, the opportunity to voice, to write their story, however they want to write it. And it's always, the prompts are given so that if you want to write a poem, you want to write an essay, you want to write a memoir, you want to write a short story, it doesn't matter what you want to write, what you write. You can even ignore the prompt. The whole point is to write what you want to write. And that's basically what it is.
Mm-hmm. And I find sometimes, too, that the prompt or the scenery, sometimes I sit outside and I write, and I start writing about a reed of grass, and before you know it, I'm into something completely different. So it's amazing how the prompt or the scenery or the setting where you're writing can take you to a place that you never even thought you'd go to.
Yes. And you remind me of Barbara Turner-Veselago is another one of my teachers, and her format is that in the beginning part of the day of a retreat, writers are to write what comes up for them. They're alone. They're not in a group. They're in their own space. And they are invited to write whatever comes up and to follow wherever the energy is. So often and then we submit it to her, and she reads it and gives the feedback, and then we gather at the end of the day. But the point is that what happens is so often the pieces will start out, there's a bird outside my window, and then that reminds me of a bird that came, the day my father died. So what happens is you begin, just like you said, that's what sparked it. You're sitting outside, you're looking at the tree, and then you start writing. That's the point. You start writing, you write until, something shimmers, something goes, whether it's a memory or an idea, and that can be quite magical as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you're facilitating these writing workshops, are you always working with people who want to be authors? They want to write a book, or they
no, not at all. Half and half, I'd say. I have few people that are writing. I can think of 3 right off the bat that are writing with me, have been writing with me for some time, that are writing for their children and grandchildren. They're writing their own stories to give to their offspring and offspring's offspring. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. Other people are writing just because they need to tell their story, get it down, and sitting alone in a room, only so much can come, but in that safe space where you're protected, and no one is going to question you or criticize you, and just listen to what's beautiful. Lots can come out, so it can be very healthy and therapeutic. Although the method is not a therapy, but it can be intensely therapeutic for people.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know it's different when you're in person, but now that things are online, do you find that some of your participants in the process are using their computers to write, or do you still see a lot of pen to paper?
It's mostly pen to paper, but some of them are writing on their computers. You can tell because on their camera, it looks like they're staring right into the camera.
Right.
You think, oh, are they not writing? No, but they're writing. They're just using their computer.
Mm-hmm. Do you recommend using the computer for this first kind of prompt response sort of writing?
I think what you're getting at is because we use different parts of our brain, whether we're typing or writing by hand. Mm-hmm. And, I wouldn't say either way. Like some people have some disabilities. I've been in person groups where they're not able to write with a pen, that they're writing on their iPad or their laptop as we go. Yeah, it's a personal thing. I know that different parts of the brain are accessed, but that's what they say. But I'm thinking right now of one person who writes on his computer, and his work is just drop dead exquisite, like unbelievable. Take your breath away, mic drop every time. So, it's I don't know. I really can't say. Personally, I like to write by hand when I'm starting out, and then I take it to the computer, and then I keep writing. I've got my launch point, but and I know there are quite a few people who do it like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I can't really say that I would recommend. It's absolutely a personal choice.
Well, I find that if I take it from the page, a handwritten page, and put it into the computer, it's changing between the page and the computer, and I'm stunned at what happens by the end of it. And if I do that process of rewriting it, I don't know, maybe it's a lazy thing. I just don't feel like rewriting the whole thing, so it gets a word scratched out, a little arrow pointing to a paragraph that sticks over here called 1, and another one over here called 2, and then there's 2A and 2B, and by the time I'm done, there's 2C as well. And it's like following a really convoluted treasure map to get it transcribed back into the computer. Anyway, that's just me. I mean, I'm sure every single person is different, and you could probably talk to 5 different people and have 5 different ways of coming up. And I guess it depends on what your intention is, too, because at the end of the day, if you are writing scenes that are going to someday become a novel or a memoir or even your journal, it's a different process than just writing to that prompt in this minute for 10 minutes or however long you're going to write for.
Mm-hmm.
You've started something new, which is sharing your organic writing with the world.
Yeah. I don't know where I read it. Somebody was like, Substack is the way to go. And like, I've had a blog for a while, but it's a blog. And so, I have some subscribers, whatever. It's very interesting. And then someone wrote, well, Substack's the way to go. So I created a Substack account and started posting my pieces on there. And suddenly people are reading it, rather than having, 16 views, I've got 160. I'm like,
So what is Substack? Is it like another social media platform?
It's a platform. It's sort of like MailChimp. It's got all these features to it, and you can have a paywall if you want, which I tried, and then I realized I can't do that. So I took it down. I don't know, like everybody from Bill Maher, like you can go on there, you can find all kinds of stuff going on, people with blogs, people with conversations, you can have public conversations on there. I don't know, it's just, I'm just learning it, but I have been publishing a little bit. It's the same stuff I've been publishing on my blog, but I guess because it's Substack, it's, I don't know, it's people are reading it. It's so fun.
Okay, so people are reading it. Would it be okay if you shared one of your pieces that's what you would consider to be organic?
Yeah, because this is fun, because this is, you and I write together on Wednesday mornings, and this was your prompt. And it was cute because it really fit in with what you were writing, I remember. Mm-hmm. And but I took it in a completely different direction. So the prompt was, Lucky with a question mark. Lucky?
Yeah.
So I thought about lucky, and I thought about someone who had said that I was lucky many years ago. And this is, so would you like me to read it now?
Yeah, sure. That would be great.
Okay. The channel waters rose in slow swells, the heavy ferry lifting and settling as it slid into place. Once I'd shared my proposed itinerary with the elderly gentleman who also waited on the Folkestone dock. He remarked, "You young people are so lucky." "I'm not lucky," I said. "I worked really hard to earn the money for this trip." Beside me rested my small, meticulously packed suitcase with bundles of maps and language dictionaries. I'd worked 2 jobs for 2.5 years, and I was ready to discover the world. I'd planned my trajectory through North Africa and Egypt, with the possibility of Australia and New Zealand. On my way now from England to France, I would travel on to Holland before setting out to more exotic lands. "Oh no," the white-haired gentleman said, his face so kind. "That's not at all what I meant." He was tall and elegant that October morning in the dull English sun. "When I was young, there was no possibility of such travel. That sort of freedom was unimaginable." What did I know? I had just turned 24 and thought I knew things. Before traveling and living in Europe for 6 months 2 years previously, I'd lived for a year in an isolated cabin in the mountains. I had experience. I'd lived. I hadn't considered luck factoring into the equation. I controlled my destiny, arrogantly dismissing the notion that we were all children of fortune and circumstance, because I made my own choices, forged my own path. But looking out over the Dover Strait, waiting for the ferry to take me to Calais, I began to see what I hadn't seen. I didn't ask that dignified, gentle man then about the war. The weight of moments like that doesn't fully register until years later. It was 1978. That still handsome man had very likely lived through 2 world wars. I suppose that through a certain lens, he would be considered lucky. Lucky to be free and waiting calmly on that dock for the ferry to take him to France. He may have even considered himself lucky for the friendly conversation with a naive young Canadian woman who happily accepted his invitation to join him for lunch.
That's lovely.
Thank you.
And that just came out of the prompt, lucky?
Yeah, because you just sit for a minute and you think lucky, and then I remembered that man saying that, and me being all defensive and going, "I'm not lucky, I worked really hard," and then just having that meta cognition that,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's funny how those prompts can take us back to a place and time and get us to think about things. Sometimes we think, "Oh, I can't remember half of the things that happened in my life," but a simple prompt like that can really take you back.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff is fun to write down. I'm a storyteller by trade. I speak stories all the time. I used to do a lot of public speaking, and then COVID hit. But it's interesting because my daughter, when she turned 21, she said, the best gift you could ever get me is a book of the stories you tell. And I thought, wow,
exactly.
well, there you go. So when you have these groups, do you ever have people who you say, okay, you give them the prompt, lucky or whatever the heck the prompt might be, and they write nothing?
Write nothing. I think sometimes people are going through stuff and they'll say, "I have nothing. I've just got scribbles," kind of thing. That will happen. That will definitely happen. But not nothing, even if they feel that it isn't. And I'll often encourage people to read just a snippet of something, and there'll always be a little shimmering gem of something, a little nugget, a little, yeah.
I've done quite a few of these workshops myself during the pandemic and before the pandemic, but definitely during the pandemic, and I very rarely find that someone doesn't want to read. It seems like it's a nice part of the workshop is not just writing, but sharing.
Yeah, it's very valuable. It's very valuable. And sometimes it'll happen. What'll happen if someone says they don't want to read, which does happen from time to time, I will I'll say, okay, and then I'll tell them, and this I got from Sue Reynolds, this is a nice way to do it. I'm going to come around at the end of the readings and just see if you've changed your mind. And sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't, and that's absolutely up to them. But yeah, it doesn't happen very often because, yeah, as you say, it's a real gift. It's a real gift to hear what people. The reading is something quite magical happens, and that's an example. Is because when I wrote that little lucky piece, I thought, what will I do with that? I can't really submit it anywhere. But the feedback that I got from you guys, from the other women in our group, made me see, oh no, this, what you pointed out, and I realized, oh no, this actually has some gravity to it. It has, it is a story that can be told. So yeah, so that encouraged me to do that.
Well, that's great. And then did you put it on that Substack?
Yeah.
Perfect. And you've had some good response to it on Substack.
I have.
Yay! Well, I think it's really interesting, too, when you get the groups going. One thing that we should let the listeners know loud and clear is that when the feedback comes, it's not glorified nonsense. It's like, oh, I love everything you did. Although sometimes you do love everything that the person does. But the bottom line is that it's not a critique. You're not reading and having someone say, well, you could have done a little bit more with this character here, and I didn't really understand what you were saying about that character over there. You just, it's all what you liked about the piece.
Yeah, what you like, not just, and it's not just, like as you say, it's not just, oh, that was really good, I like that. It's like, what was it that you liked? What aspect was it?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a few questions that they normally ask. If you're having problems coming up with some feedback for someone, how did it make you feel emotionally, physically? What were you seeing? Was there something that stood out? One line, one sentence, one word, that really stood out?
Yeah, and also just sometimes it's even just repeating back a phrase, just one phrase or one image that caught one's attention.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really, I love that aspect of it because I think there are times when we write something really personal, if someone criticizes it, it does really shut a person down.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, it doesn't matter how much you've written and how many nice people have said nice things about your work. If one person says, oh, that sucks, or you should change it this way, then you just, yeah, it can just stop you in your tracks.
Yeah. It can. So if we take that one step further, you've written a book. It's a book that you obviously liked when you wrote it, and you're now taking it to an editor who may say, nah, I want you to change this. And then they tell you all the reasons why they think you should change that.
Right.
Does that hurt somewhere?
I don't know. I think partly because it was finished so long ago, I don't have the same kind of attachment to every single word that I did then. My relationship to the book has changed. And I also, at this point, I think I'm really looking forward, because they're not just going to tear it to pieces. They will help me, because that's the thing about manuscript evaluation. If you're good at it, you're going to try and help make the piece stronger, not just tell you what's wrong with it. Right? And that I look forward to. Mm-hmm. Tell me how to make this stronger. Tell me what's missing. Tell me where you're kicked out, where there's a question. I want to know that, because I'm really dedicated. I want to make a good book. I want to tell a good story. Mm-hmm. That's important to me. So at some point, you got to have tough skin for sure. But yeah, I know I need help. So I'm willing to listen.
Mm-hmm. Now, an editor must be a whole different beast. I mean, they have to know writing. They have to know it inside and out. But they also have to have their pulse on the gist of the story. I've often wondered how come more editors aren't authors themselves? Because it's a real writing skill to be an editor.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because also when I was in Victoria, I had the occasion I was at a party and I heard this woman say that she was a literary translator, and I was fascinated by that. So I asked her to lunch and asked her about that, because she was Italian, Canadian, and she spoke French, Italian, English, Spanish, and not Greek, but the other thing, and one First Nations language, which I don't know which one it was. And I thought, what is that like? And the thing that stood out for me was that she said, when you're translating literary work, it's not like standing at a meeting and whispering somebody's ear. You have to think about context, cultural references, so that when you're, and she only translated into English because that was her most confident, maybe into Italian, but her most confident language. Like she said, there might be a phrase or a way of referring to something in a language that when translated makes absolutely no sense in English. So she has to think about what kind of a phrase in English would work to bring about that same idea, that same notion. And I thought, and she would also, what occurred to me is she would also have to be a damn good writer. If she's going to translate literary works, it's got to be a literary English translation. So I thought but then I don't think there's any time to write your own stuff if you're immersed in that kind of an endeavor.
Yeah, I think it has to be a whole different beast. But I know my aunt in Switzerland, she speaks 7 languages fluently. There'll be times when she's speaking to me in French, and I'll think, I really didn't understand a word you just said. And often it's because she will choose the phrase that suits what she's trying to express best, and there can be 3 languages in one sentence.
I love it. That's great.
And she looks at me as if, why didn't you understand that? And I just, oh, yes, I forgot you don't speak Hungarian. But there's such a good way of saying this in Hungarian that it just doesn't exist in another language. And I start to laugh. Yeah, okay, I'm totally lost, Waz, but thanks. Anyway, you know what? As always, we are out of time. I'm sorry, but we could go on for another hour for sure. And we will do that again as things progress in your life, and as we have more shows about writing. We're going to be able to, in the near future, bring in some more guests and have conversations together again, because the pandemic is waning, so I've heard. We'll see what happens with that. Yeah, anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations again on being published. And I know the process is going to be a long one, but just getting accepted and knowing that your book is going to be on the shelves of bookstores is an amazing accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you so much again, Brenda, and thanks for having me.
We always enjoy having you. That's it for Fresh Waves today. Thanks for joining us on Fresh Waves, and we'll catch you again next time.